Joy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I am excited to talk about your book, The Recovery Cycle. When I read through the table of contents, I was like, hot damn, we're going to have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see, you got sober at 41 years ago. So you must have started when you were really, really young.
Yeah, I was. I
Yeah.
was very young,
Yeah.
probably preteen.
Preteen. Yeah. I relate to that. Wow. Yeah. But before we jump into the book and all the amazing things that you do, I like to do a little warm-up game called the lightning round, which is actually very slow. So it starts with, what was your favorite book when you first got sober?
Oh my gosh.
I know it was a minute ago. I was
Well,
wondering, the book landscape must have changed so much since you got sober.
it did. And when I got sober, really, there was only the 12-step program out there. So I don't know if I would have said the big book was my favorite book, but it was the book that I turned to and identified with. Sometimes not.
Right.
And but I want to say you're making me think of, I went to a meeting. I was maybe 3 months sober, and I had this idea that I wasn't very smart. And so what I did is I thought, if I read a bunch of books, and I hadn't gone to college yet because I was young, if I read a bunch of books, I'll look smart. So I remember bringing to this very, very big meeting Atlas Shrugged by
Oh,
Ayn Rand, right? And so I sat in a corner and read this, and it was like I felt that at least I would have the appearance of being a smart person, because I felt so empty inside and not very smart in my life.
right.
But
Yeah.
I really wanted to be. I wanted to be an educated person. It was really a value that I held dear. And so that's funny that you mentioned it. And I never finished the book, by the way. I never finished that book.
But you finished many other books
I
since then.
finished so many other books. Yes, yes,
So many other
yes.
books. Yeah, I mean, I really identify with, reading the big book, and then some of it really resonated and some of it really did not. But especially, it's like old-timey language. It was written in the program started in 1935. So this old-timey language. And it's all like, male oriented. It's kind of patriarchal. So everything is, chapter to the wives. I was like, oh, how condescending.
Yeah,
but still
yeah,
so powerful, and so those 12 steps are really inspired. So the big book has a lot of solution in it.
exactly. And that, I don't know if you've read this book, but called The Writing of the Big Book by William Shaberg. And
Oh,
I would highly suggest for anybody that has any question about how that came down, in a beautiful narrative, he gives a blow-by-blow account of exactly who the players were, why the word higher power is in there instead of God, like why it's kind of interchangeable, and the idea of spirituality and not religious. It's very it's a beautifully written book, and it's so well researched. I can't say enough about it. He also does workshops, or not workshops, but he goes online and talks. You might want to consider having him on. He's
what was
really a
his name again?
fascinating. William Shaberg, Shaeberg. Fascinating book. If you can see any of his workshops that he does, he'll take like a chapter, and he makes it really exciting. The
Oh,
players
nice.
really come to life.
I will absolutely 100% check that out. I'm in the process of writing myself, and so it's interesting to really get to the history of how things began, like anonymity, like why that was so important in the beginning. A lot of times people think it's tied to you know income, like if you out somebody as being alcoholic, then it limits their financial prospects. But in reality, the people who started it were getting so many inquiries that it was taking over their lives, so they needed to remain anonymous so that it didn't they weren't overwhelmed by all the requests for help,
Right.
which I thought was really interesting. That's a really good book. Thank you so much. Do you have a go-to quote or mantra that you live by?
Huh. A go-to quote or mantra that I live by.
Like, the one day
Um,
at a time, obviously, name of the podcast is something that I come back to, like progress, not perfection, or sometimes it's the
well, I have a lot. I have a lot of them, but one of the ones I like is easy does it, but do it.
he doesn't do it.
And really, I think and you hear in the program, it's not for people who want it. It's for people who, but I think it's not for people who want it. It's not for people who need it. It's really for people who do it.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yeah.
get the benefits of that. And at least I have over the years. And yeah, there's all these other ways. And I think that's great because it's not a great fit for everyone. Um, but so that would be, I don't know if that's a mantra, but that's what I like
Yeah.
a lot. I like that one.
I'll
And you know
include
what?
I'll include cliche in my question. That's a really good one. Thank you.
Keep going, like in the process of writing this book, there were times when I had a lot of self-doubt.
Oh,
And frankly, it was a lot of work. I mean, you're writing a book, so it's a lot of work. It was a lot of research. I love all that. I loved doing it. I love the process. I'm an introvert. A really great book I like is the, Quiet. Uh, you know,
oh yeah.
have you heard that
Susan,
book?
is that Susan Carter?
Susan Cain. I
Kane.
think it's
Okay, yeah.
Cain. Yeah.
She has an amazing TED Talk.
Yeah. The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. I love that. I love that book. So in writing this book, I would do my meditation, which is part of my routine in the morning, which has developed and morphed into different forms over time. But currently, it's in my meditation. I was sitting for 20 minutes, and what kept coming up was keep going, keep
Mm.
going, keep going, keep going. It's okay, keep going. So that's been really probably the more guiding mantra that's comes to mind in the last couple of years, at least.
I'm totally gonna adopt that. I've often thought that if the program or the big book was all boiled down to one word, it would be just relax. Relax. Keep going, right? But move forward with this calm energy.
Well, and you saying that because now I'm 41 years down the line, right, from the day that I first got sober, and like we were talking before, the first bit of time was really, I was so worried. I wanted to do it right. I had a lot of anxiety. I was particularly afraid of people. So, and that was my challenge. How can I connect with people? I really believe that's where our salvation is going to
Uh-huh.
come from, is learning how to stay sober from other people and then a higher power, of course. But so, so, oh, I just lost my train of thought.
Introverted, afraid of people, needing
S-
to
so I just can't believe I just went somewhere else because I
welcome
have
to
so
my
many
world.
thoughts.
Yes, ma'am. I relate.
Oh,
I
I
feel
know now it is. So
oh,
right.
okay.
So now, all this time later, if I could tell that younger self something, it would be, you know what? Just relax. It's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to work out. Because when I first got sober, I used to think, you know what? I'm probably not going to make it until I'm 30. And then when I was 30, I thought, this isn't going to happen. I'm probably not going to make it until I'm 40. And I don't mean stay sober. I meant I'm probably going to die by then. I don't know why that came to me, but um, so now I think, God, I'm so grateful for all of this sober time. So, hindsight, looking back, I would have said, you know what? You're lovable. Relax. It's going to be okay.
Oh, I love that. I love that because so many of us, addiction really does a number on your self-esteem, right? So many of us show up with so much self-hatred, self-loathing, self-consciousness that, going back to your younger self and being like, oh, it's going to be okay.
It's
Just
going to be
relax.
okay. All of
Yeah.
those experiences are, you know, they are what they are. You did what you did. You didn't know any better. And that's all okay. It's okay. And now you have a chance to be much more congruent with your values
Mm,
and progressively, which
right.
I think is really my definition of recovery is, or what I think about what that means is, it's a process of being the process of becoming an observer of my thoughts and feelings, my head and my heart, with the progressive alignment uh, to what I value and hold dear. So that just continues to happen with time in recovery, this progressive alignment with what I value and hold dear.
That's
Be
beautiful.
gentle with myself along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting is even if I just know that there's going to be people out there being like, well, I did know better and I chose poorly anyway. But I would argue that the fear is that we have before we get sober is so deep that it really colors all of our decision making process. Like we make these decisions, even though we know what the right thing to do is. It's that underlying fear that drives our emotions, and we make decisions based off of emotion and then justify logically. But if we peel it all the way back, it's really there was fear. And I'm able to get to that place of compassion when I recognize, oh, I was afraid. I don't deserve condemnation. I deserve empathy for that fear. Now, do we take responsibility for our bad actions? Absolutely. But it is important to recognize, where did those thoughts and feelings come from first? And I feel
Yeah,
like, that's part of reality, right? And taking
absolutely.
responsibility.
All the conditioning, whether it's, we've adopted it from somebody, messages that came to us, or
Yes.
whether I've somehow picked up that, what do they call the torch?
The
And now
torrent,
I'm
yeah.
gonna, now I'm gonna fire up my own conditioning that's going to keep me fearful and keep me uh, uh, separated from people in whatever way I do. Yeah, learning about that, being mindful of my thoughts and
Mhm.
my feelings
And
about
your
that,
yeah.
and then making these almost micro adjustments.
Yeah.
So maybe I do make that mistake again, and then I do it again, and then I fall in the hole, and eventually I walk around the hole, and then I walk
Yeah.
down another street. So
Right.
it can happen like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I had another thought, but
I love that. No, it is a progressive alignment with values over time. I like that. Um, it's so funny. You already touched a little bit on my next question, which was about morning routine. So you spend about 20 minutes do you meditate in the morning? Is it a morning routine?
yes, it is. I come out to my office and I have a number of books. I've got many books, and I usually read one or two, sometimes three. Sometimes I write down a dream. Sometimes I take a book and I'll do a little writing. And I spend some time uh, doing a little bit of that and thinking about what I've read. And my friend gave me this book called Therapy, and it's such a beautiful book about birds and tying meditation in with birds, the natural world, which I'm a big
Mhm.
fan of. Um, so I do that, and then I sit for 20 minutes, which is a tall order. It might sound like that for some people, but I do it now, but I didn't start out by doing that. And so then that kind of sets my day. I do that and it sets my day. And I even got this little meditation bell that I use to start it off. And yeah, that's how it goes. Now, I have this book here.
You do quiet meditation or
So
guided or
yes,
music?
quiet.
Quiet.
I did a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was doing the Calm. I have that app. I've done a
The
few,
calm.
and then Kristen Neff has a great one on self-compassion.
Oh, nice.
It's all of her meditations are geared towards self-compassion. And she's like the big researcher on self-compassion, which is for me is like this gateway to it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to, you know, beat yourself up for whatever you've done. So she's a great one.
Say her name again, Kristen.
Kristen Neff, Neff.
Her name sounds familiar. I love the Calm app. There are so many amazing teachers on there.
Yeah.
Insight Timer is another good one, but yeah, having an app to help you in the beginning is super.
But
super
in the
helpful.
beginning, when I started out, I always felt a little um, uncomfortable when people talk about meditation because I really didn't do anything for a very long time. I couldn't sit still. My mind was too, I was just I was going to dances or doing this I just couldn't sit still.
Yeah.
But I did walk a lot. And over time, I
Mm.
started walking alone a lot. And then somebody said, "Hey, I do a walking meditation." And I thought, "Oh, I'm meditating. I'm walking. I'm
Yeah.
alone. I'm present." So another book The Long Road Turns to Joy by, how do you pronounce his name? Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh.
I
Yeah.
might be saying it
So
wrong, but I'm not sure.
I
The
think you're right.
long
Thich
road,
Nhat Hanh.
the long
Turns
road.
to Joy. It's a small little book, and that was very helpful for me in the beginning because it had short little passages, and I could read one of those, and it helped, as I was walking, to kind of muse on the passage.
Mm.
I used to take long walks. I used to go like sometimes 3-hour walks. I'd go from
Wow.
one town to the next just because I had so much energy and I needed to do something with it, channel it.
Yeah, I mean, we often talk about, the mental and the spiritual, but the physical is also really important. There's that book, The Body Keeps the Score, about how we
Absolutely.
hold trauma in our body, and walking. What a beautiful way to allow yourself to do something that comes naturally to you, like honor how your body wants to heal.
Exactly. That
Um,
said,
yeah.
right, for this person, Joy, to not overdo it. That has been a really big lesson. I mean, I've done yoga. I became a yoga teacher. I did all this stuff. I had to do it
You're like,
all.
you're
And
like my spirit twin. What do you mean don't overdo it? That's not a thing. Overachievers
exactly.
Anonymous. Yes, I
So
relate.
now I'm really doing a lot more paying attention because I can still,
Okay.
like, being on my own, and the endorphins kick in, and I just want to do more and more and more because if it
Yeah.
feels good, I
Yeah.
like
More.
feeling good.
Yeah. More is good. More of everything.
Yeah.
I love that. And we were talking a little bit earlier about spiritual experiences, and I think I've been asking my guests about spiritual experiences because I think there's a lot of confusion, spiritual between spirituality and religion. How do you think of spirituality, and how does it show up for you in your life?
Okay. It's almost, who is it that said, Kierkegaard? This is coming to mind. Life, uh, is understood looking backwards, but we must live life
Mm,
forward, forward, or something like that. Um, and so when I think about spirituality, I mean, when I first got sober, I wasn't really, I didn't have a big grasp on the spiritual experiments. I remember sitting out, there's the book part in the book, I think it says, on a starlit night, we look up and who made all of this, kind of a thing. And I remember like that one time, and I remember where I was. I remember I was 20 years old. I remember looking up. I remember having all these instant friends. Um, and a lot of the people were older, but there was a group of young people. So that was sort of an experience that I started to think, who did make all of this? How is all this working? It was, so can't think of an experience that said, wow, this is a spiritual experience. Because when I look back, the person that was plopped herself in my life when I first went to that recovery home, she literally said, I'm going to be your sponsor. And because I wasn't going to ask anyone, I was way too shy and unworthy at that time in my
mm,
mind. So over time, it talks about the educational variety. So over
mhm.
time with this woman, I mean, I remember 10 years in saying, do you really like me? Like I still didn't think that. And I laugh about that today because she's still in my life. And she has been such a source of care and unconditional love. And, so what is spirituality? It's for sure, it's this thing that we can't quite describe. Some people think of it's this feeling. they call it a higher power, but I think it's like me caring about you, you caring about me caring about me, and you caring about you. And then how are we going to relate to each other with this care? And when we relate to each other with care and kindness, something happens that I can't describe, that I could only say it's a spiritual experience. It's an energy that I feel um, in a way animates that better part of myself and guides my will.
I love that idea of animating the best part of you.
Yeah, it really is. And I think so there's something, it doesn't come from another person, because I can be sitting in my meditation. And even this morning, I was thinking, I was really tired. I didn't get much sleep last night. And so I came out here thinking, oh my gosh. And I thought, wait a minute, I get to go have a relationship right now with this energy source that I really don't know how I've gotten from 1981 to here and live the life that I'm living now. I went from, being a house cleaner to now I have people helping me clean my garage. I was telling you, you know, and so on the way to my chair, I'm thinking I get to go do this. And so by the time I'm in my chair, I'm realizing that there can be some sort of infusion that I can access. That's really not coming from me, because my brain left on its own without me observing it and hearing what it's generating, which is that fear stuff, is out to get me still, So that's why I do this. I go to this place of it of mine that I've created. And incidentally, I remember what I wanted to say to you when you're talking about addiction and fear. You had said that, we're so guided by our fears. And I describe in my book, I actually talk about, of Mice and Men, in Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, there's a character named Lenny, and he likes to pet soft, furry animals. But he likes it so much, he squeezes them to death. So I liken addiction to, in a way, like that. It's trying to help us feel safe and warm and comfortable. But then its grip gets really, really strong, and it'll kill us.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of a longer answer, and I don't know if it quite answered.
No, that was really insightful. A great way to put that. Yeah. I always talk about, I felt like drugs and alcohol saved my life to some extent when I was young, and I couldn't manage my own feelings, but it was my savior that became my executioner, because it was killing me at the end.
Right.
I put myself in very dangerous situations, and yeah, it was
right. And you must have crossed some line.
Oh yeah, many lines.
Many lines, right?
You ever hear of the shifting baseline syndrome, where like it's like the baseline just keeps getting lower and lower, and in the book they talk about seeking lower companionship till you become the lower companionship.
Right.
That was me.
Yeah.
Not fun. Speaking of shifting baseline, let's talk a little bit about your personal experience. And you got sober at 20, but let's talk a little bit about how you got to recovery. You started using when you were really young. Do you know why you started using?
I had, everybody has their stories. I felt uncomfortable in my home environment. There was a lot of my siblings were, in that world. They were doing some drugs and alcohol. And so I entered that way, and there was a little chaos going on. That just kind of sent me. It felt so good the first time I had something. I think I was at my brother's party or something. And I knew from day one it was going to be a problem, and that I would either have to stop or it was going to kill me. I mean, I really knew in that moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right from the beginning.
Oh, from the beginning. I just knew it, because it just was, it transformed me so much. It was that thing that, what is
Yeah.
recovery? The recovery is like, it's this process of recovering something lost, or recovering back to our health, or, getting something back. And that part of me, a connection to our soul, let's say my innermost self.
Yeah.
So that part of me felt very lost, and I was very disconnected from it. And, maybe I'll write about that in a memoir someday, but basically, this was the agent, that alcohol was the agent and cocaine was the agent that really just made everything okay. So it accelerated very quickly. And, I remember in my high school yearbook, I wrote the thing I wrote said, wanted to go to college, try as hard as you try hard and never give up. Like my meditation, it's funny how it's like, keep going, just don't give up. So, so right before I got sober, I wanted somebody to drive me off a cliff and do heroin with me. And I had never done heroin. I thought, well, I should try that. And, and he said, no, he said, no, no, no. And you know what? That's when I went to rehab, because I knew in that moment I was giving up. I would be giving up my life if I went down that track. That trajectory was a drive off the cliff. I knew it. I just knew it.
Wow.
And so that's maybe
a
maybe
spiritual experience.
Maybe that was the spiritual experience. And especially when he looked at me, this heroin person, and said, because I knew he was a heroin, he said, you know what? He looked at me with such pity that I just thought, oh my God, this is really sad. You were talking about lower companion. This is really sad. So I put myself into rehab. That was actually after I'd been in rehab a week, and then I went back for good. So I went in for 3 months.
Okay. That is not uncommon. I keep hearing this story about people having multiple, rehab experiences. Can I just backtrack a tiny bit and ask you about what was the nature of the chaos in your home? Your siblings were older than you?
Yeah. My mother was married a few times, and there was just, it was unstable.
Unstable. Yeah. Okay. Unstable. That's listen, I'm not going to ask you to say more than you want to say. Unstable is good. That's tough when what happened to your dad?
My father was around, and he moved to, he was in a different city. So he was around. We saw him on the weekends, and
Okay.
both of my parents are still alive today. I'm so blessed, right?
Yeah.
And they both have wonderful spouses. We're so lucky to have them around.
Yeah.
And they're both healthy, and we get to see them. They're both lucid. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We're very, very lucky. And I'm very grateful that. So I developed a relationship with my father, I think, after I got sober more. I made a big attempt to do that, to go see him.
Was the divorce, sorry to interrupt you, was the divorce hard on you?
The first one, I was so young, I didn't really know. I think, because I was, I think 5 or 6, I figured, it's funny because that's a great question, because I think about my attitude today when things that are hard come my way, and all throughout my life, it's like there's got to be a pony in here somewhere, right? If there's that whole thing.
Eternal optimist, yeah.
Yeah, but I thought, wow, this is an experience. I just remember thinking that this is an experience people go through, and this is just my experience, and I'll get through it. Like I was so young, I think, that I didn't know that it was going to have the impact on me that it did. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, that's
so
fair.
Yeah. And then the second divorce, it was fine. I was really glad that my mother divorced him. And And then she got married to a really wonderful man, was married to him for many, many, many years. She moved out of state. And so when I was 17, now I hear about these children at home at 25, and you know, how great that is, how nurturing it is. Because I remember at 17, I was like, okay, I got to figure it out. So that's what I did. I figured it out. You know, I just figured it out, started cleaning houses. But between 17 and 20, it really took a dive.
Okay,
My
that's
using.
when your drinking and using took off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned cocaine and alcohol. You were in the 80s, girl. That's when the cocaine was, that's like Miami Vice time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was that time.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of, there was a lot going on at that time. Yeah.
There was a lot
Yeah.
going on. That's fair. So what happened to you? Did you have like that moment of clarity? When was it that you decided I have to stop?
Well, I have to stop. And then there was attempts to stop along the way.
Right.
I remember my first blackout was when I realized I have to stop. And I was living in, I think, Sun Valley at the time. And then I moved away from the boyfriend, and I tried to stop and couldn't. And I took, I talk about this in my book. Not a whole lot. I don't talk a lot, but I do talk about some of my experience because I think it's really relevant, that
Absolutely.
I did a bunch of Valium, ended up in the hospital, and then I knew I had to stop. Shortly thereafter, I think I put myself into rehab, and I ended up a week there, and they said, stay 3 months. And I said, no, I can do it on my own with all this support. But after a week, I went out, and then within a week, I was, like I said, I was with that guy saying, hey, I want to do something harder, heroin. And then it was over. So that's how that whole thing came down. And, there's a guy, a very smart man, who talks about, DiCarlo. I can't believe anyway, he talks about, we have this pre-contemplation period where we don't even know that we want to quit. He's done a lot of studies on smoking. And then we have a contemplation period where you're starting to think about the cost factor. What am I going to do? What is it going to take? So I think I was in that contemplation period for a number of months. And then there's taking the action. Once you decide what I'm going to do, then there's taking the action. And so that's how it came down. So if anything, I would say to people, like, if you're thinking about it, it's okay. Just keep going. Yeah. Keep thinking about it. Keep gathering information. Don't give up. And, because the suffering doesn't need to be forever. And you don't want to quit before, play it out. You're going to die anyway. So just play it out. Right?
Yeah, no, it's so interesting because, there's a couple of ways that recovery happens, right? Sometimes people have like that moment of clarity, they have a profound experience, and then they get sober. And then there are those of us who recognize that this is a problem, I have to quit and can't, right? Like you're stuck in the throes of addiction. And it isn't one single experience. It wasn't one single person, situation or piece of information. It was like a series of things that contributed to finally tipping the scales, right? Like the law of 51%, it doesn't have to be 100% I'm all in, sometimes we just need 51% to just tip the scales that helps us to get sober. So that's a good point, that sometimes it happens in a moment of clarity. Sometimes it happens in a series, but to just keep going.
Definitely. I mean, and that's been proven with people. So the guy's name is Carlo Di Clemente. I don't want to.
Thank you.
I definitely don't want to. He wrote a book called Addiction and Change: How Addictions Develop and Addicted People Recovery. A lot of his research was done on smokers, which I did a long time. That was actually harder than quitting drinking. Overeating and smoking. Those are my best friends when I first got sober. But yeah, he's a very smart guy, and he has all of those stages laid out and in that book.
Yeah, I've heard that, the pre-contemplation and then the action. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes.
Contemplation, preparation. That's what it is.
Contemplation.
Pre-contemplation,
Yeah.
contemplation, preparation,
And then action.
action. Yeah. Because the preparation is you're a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
And the action is now I'm doing some, and then there's maintenance.
Maintenance, right. There you
Which,
got it. You got them all.
which there's actually six. Six is, I think, if you have a problem, then you have to go back into the cycle again. But he talks about the five, but also there's the idea of maintenance. What does maintenance look like?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my stuff takes off is
Yeah.
you can get sober. And once you're there, how can I grow into my greatest potential and live the life that I want?
That
Sober.
is a great, that might be a great segue to talk a little bit about the recovery cycle, a practical guide to loving your sober life. I wanted to pull up the table of contents as sort of like a guide for the duration of our conversation, because you go through, I'm just going to call out a couple of things. So you talk about the actual addiction cycle. I think it's so important for people to be able to answer the question, is this really a problem? And you address that right off the bat. Do you want to talk a little bit about how people can come to the conclusion that this is a problem and I do need to stop?
Well, I mean, there's many ways to figure that out. You can look at the 20 questions. There's like 20 questions by Johns Hopkins University. That's a great way. Just Google it. And then you go down these list of questions and then that's one way.
Yeah.
Another way
I passed that test, by the way. Flying color.
It's a good one. It's a really good one because it's just the 20 questions. It's just questions, you just answer them.
Have you drank too much when you didn't intend to? Have you missed lapsed time? Have you missed work? Are your relationships suffering? Those are really good questions to help kind of break that denial.
Has it caused a problem in your life in any way? How do you feel after you use? Why are you reading these questions now? It doesn't ask that, but why now?
Right.
And people, I think, that don't have a problem usually don't think about it. Now, that might not always be true, but if you're thinking about it a lot, chances are it might be something you might be a heavy drinker, but you might want to stop. I think the whole sober curious movement, right? So you might catch yourself before going over that invisible line. But I think that, so the addiction cycle, what is it? Do you have a preoccupation with your addiction, your drug of choice or behavior of choice, whatever that is? Do you have any rituals that go with it? Do you drive by the dealer's house? Do you walk down the ice cream aisle? Do you think about, and then, I used to go down to a yogurt shop that it was open at 2 a.m. and I'd have like 3 different yogurt shops. So I didn't go to the same one every night. So they knew, so, so that was one of my rituals at that time. Ritualization. And then you come on down to, then you use.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, you actually get high when you're thinking about using, doing the rituals. That's when the dopamine starts to really kick in. Using is sort of like, well, you're doing it, but it's not, you might even black out. And then afterwards, is there some sort of guilt, shame, despair, just in general, bad feelings that I've done this? And is there like, oh, I'm never going to do this again, or it wasn't that bad, or like, how now are you going to get out of those bad feelings? So you're just going to wait it out. But eventually, you suspect there might be a problem. It felt a little too bad. You're a little embarrassed. I was just talking to somebody yesterday. She went to one of her final things was going to a funeral and dancing on a table at a funeral.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm not sure if there's any culture that would find that appropriate.
No, exactly. And that was really she thought I can't do it anymore. So do you have some incident or guilt or whatever the feeling is? But the person that suffering from addiction will somehow end up back being preoccupied with their drug or behavior of choice. So that's kind of the round, and all of that preoccupation, the rituals, the using, the guilt, shame, despair, all drops down into isolation.
Isolation. Yeah, that is the end result. That's okay. So that was beautifully illustrated. I related to all of that. And so then you move in your book to part 2, which is the freedom part, and you talk about the recovery cycle. How do I enter the cycle of recovery? Now, what I neglected to ask you, when you went through rehab, you had an exposure of the 12 steps. And is that when you met your sponsor?
Yes, she came to the place and appointed me, or she said, I'm gonna be your sponsor.
Yeah. So you were
Yep.
the designated sponsee. That's awesome. And you
Yeah.
went through the
The
process
spiritual
of,
guide. I like to call her my spiritual guide, but yes, she
yeah,
is, she
your
is
spiritual
a
guide.
spiritual guide and friend.
Yeah, I love that. And you went through, you did the whole 12 step. Were you doing multiple things at the same time, or you just did 12 steps and then other things later? How did that pan out for you?
Things for
Well,
quitting.
like therapy or
Oh yeah. Well,
other.
she said, just I wanted to go back to school immediately. And she said, no, stay. I kind of did exactly what she said. I mean, you don't have to, but I just did. I was so young. I kind of needed that. So I went to therapy probably pretty soon on. I've been to all different kinds of therapy over the course of my life.
I
So
love therapy.
I know, I
What
really
kinds of
love it.
therapy have you done?
Gosh,
Like cognitive behavioral, probably.
mostly that. Yeah, yeah.
Everybody does that. CBT.
EMDR,
Ooh, love it.
hypnotherapy.
I'm a hypnotherapist.
Oh yeah, I had a really odd experience with hypnotherapy. It was really, yeah,
Was it negative?
it was scary.
Oh, yeah, it can
It,
be.
it can be, it was scary, you know.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting experience. So I went back and then she dialed it back. It was really
Yeah.
interesting. She had me dial it way back.
Mhm.
So I love all these different forms of therapy. Jungian, I didn't get too much into that, but the cognitive behavioral therapist, we did that. Also, I'm also a transactional analysis practitioner, which you might not know, but it's it's like the parent, adult, child. There's the id, the ego, the super ego, and Eric Berne, like
Yeah.
I'm okay, you're okay. There was
Yeah.
that in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
So what he does is he takes what's observable, like how are you talking and how are you behaving as a parent, adult, or child. So the id, the ego, the super ego is more of an internal process, where the parent, adult, child is we take what's observable and you analyze it and say, is that your critical parent, or is that your nurturing parent?
Interesting.
Is that your fun-free child? So that was another really great modality, because it's understandable to an 8-year-old.
Mhm. I love these types of therapy that are really parts integration or parts exploration. I did process therapy that was about exploring different parts. And then I have since learned about internal family systems, which is, yeah, which is
Yeah.
parts work, and the attachment style theories. Yeah, they all kind of fundamentally do the same thing, which is, acknowledge different parts of ourselves and then break it down to, which parts are sort of protecting you, which are the parent, which are the, different, protector roles. So, and then integrating all those different parts. It's really interesting to see how people sort of self-heal at the end of the day. It's like all the answers are within us. We just need someone to help us facilitate that internal exploration.
Right. And identify that part of us, that pure, essential, that return to our wholeness, right? That part of us that's that whole part of us.
Yeah.
You talked about integration. And I think what's really interesting, you mentioned attachment, I do talk about that, like briefly talk about that also in my book, in a way that's understandable.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting when you start to relate to people, especially in romantic relationship, how knowing oneself at that level, am I anxious, or am I avoidant, or am I secure? Rarely do people end up in a 12-step program or in therapy, like completely secure, they probably wouldn't be there.
Right.
But yeah, but you can earn, Daniel Siegel talks about earned secure, where you can earn it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm a big believer in, if you like therapy, definitely go. It definitely has changed my life.
Yeah,
And
it's a process. I was trying to explain this to somebody recently where this gal was talking about terrible things that happen and she doesn't want to face it, like she's scared. And my question was, what is it that you need in order to feel safe? Right? Because if it's this element of vulnerability, not being safe, being re-traumatized. And I feel like that's what the role of the therapist is they create a safe space and a process so that you can, process your feelings to resolution rather than cover them, bury them, distract from them with addiction, all those things.
absolutely. I mean, and has no investment in your choices. Yes, it can point out the highest possible price, and maybe help you with what are the prices, the price and the prize, because that will allow any individual to access their own uh, adult decision-making process. And if there's a mistake made, well, you grow in wisdom and grace, move on. You learn from it and move on. So I really think that, and there's also a study that talks about the relationship being more important than the intervention or the therapeutic modality.
The relationship to self,
The relationship with the person, with the therapist.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, that's creating a safe space, which you were talking about, I think is really essential in the therapeutic environment, and essential for healing.
Essential.
We've got to be, because I know, and maybe you, but a lot of people, it's hard to feel safe within myself. Or comfortable, right? But if I can, at the very least, I don't trust people off the bat just because they have a shingle that says therapist. It's, does this person have a trustworthy record? And that trust is built over time.
Yeah.
So now if I'm looking at people as, am I going to take a risk on this person and share a little bit and see how what a little bit at a time, how they treat my pearls that are maybe a little varnished, how, my response now, I'm even with that, I'm being responsible for, I'm not making them responsible. Oh, they weren't trustworthy. Can't blame them. I'm taking a risk on these people and they build a trustworthy record over time. And that works for anything, dating, friendships.
Yeah, it really does.
Sponsors, therapists, all relationships.
And I'm glad that you highlighted the idea of being honest with ourselves first in order to be able to communicate our needs to others, right? I want to transition a little bit to, you had mentioned before about Recovering Couples Anonymous, and we were kind of joking around before we hit record about case building.
Yes.
Maybe that speaks to like avoidant attachment, but I was like, I feel so seen because it's a funny thing that we do in relationship when we don't have a lot of history of healthy relationships. You get, maybe your family of origin was not a safe place, and so then you sort of get into relationships with others that are problematic and dysfunctional, and then we get sober and then we try to learn healthy relationships. But it's so interesting, like if you have like an avoidant attachment style, that we do like this subconscious case building. I definitely did that with my now husband when we were first dating, as I was looking for reasons why I couldn't trust him. I had trust issues, some pretty major trust issues. And so he would do something, like if he spent money in a certain way, or spent his time in a certain way, or I was secretly like building a case of why this wasn't going to work, or that maybe he wasn't, now we talk about red flags all the time. How do you identify the red flags? Can you talk to me a little bit about what case building means to you and how you have been able to overcome that?
Sure.
If that's is that a thing? Do we overcome it?
I was just doing it yesterday. Okay, so I could talk a little bit about it. First of all, it's basically blame, right?
Blame.
I want to blame somebody for my discomfort
Right.
or for them not doing it my way, for them not making me feel safe, for them not making me feel fill in the blank, right? And so the moment I'm blaming, that's when the case building begins. So again, going back to this idea, the process of becoming an observer of my thoughts and feelings. Blame it's like taking a drink. It's a drug of choice. If I can catch it. So now that I know, let's say, just recently, my husband, you talked about spending my time. He was spending what I thought was too much time with somebody else, was taking time away from me. He doesn't love me, right? Where am I going to fall in? And now we've been married for over 25 years or so, right?
You lose track after a while.
And
right?
we have a good marriage. We love each other. We like each other most days, we're compatible enough.
Yeah.
We have good chemistry. We have good communication. Yet that thought came in my head. But what did I do? I thought, what? The first thing is, if I stop that, what needs to be healed in me? First of all,
there
right?
It is.
There's boom, right?
Yeah.
And when I look at that thought, because I thought, well, I'm going to tell him. And I did tell him. And he said, I'm feeling blamed. I said, I'm not blaming you. I'm sharing my feelings. And I mean, now everybody's going to hear it, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of want to impress this idea of having the conversation, because we have a safe space now to talk about these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized that, wow, that part of me that doesn't feel, meanwhile, I have been doing my thing for 3 years because I've had to really work, and I haven't been around for him on certain days, right? So, but this slice of time was, wow, what needs to be healed in me?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can focus on that, then, and have some compassion for myself.
Yeah.
Take my eyes off of him completely. Have compassion for myself.
Yeah.
And know that what the facts are about our relationship. You know what I mean? This is, it made no sense. So the conversation becomes a much different conversation. So I got to go back and say, something, maybe it sounded like I was blaming you, but I was just really missing you.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to be close to him at that moment. So I got to go back in and say that. I mean, maybe this is TMI, but
it's
I
not. Who can't relate to that?
But who can't relate to that? So, right. So again, if I'm blaming case building, the case building starts when I take that one blame. So what I could have done is said, yeah, he's spending all this time with these people. And by the way, he's done that for all these years. And then I looked at his calendar, and he's going to do it again now so now the case is starting to build, right?
Yeah.
So the blame is the first thing, and the case building is what I'm laying on top of it. I remember a therapist used to call it gunny sacking,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm glad you said that's relatable, because, you mentioned Recovering Couples Anonymous. It's really such a great program for couples to get all these little secrets out and to heal together. And it's really remarkable. It's a remarkable therapeutic, not therapy, but therapeutic program. Very different from AA, because there's a special workbook that you do together. People have sponsored couples, which is really a lovely thing. And, Patrick Carnes and a lot of really big people in the field, and, appreciate it and suggest it. So it's a really good thing for couples.
Is it for couples that have experienced addiction, or is it just couples that have problematic relationships?
Anyone.
Anyone.
They're the only
Oh,
requirement.
I
Yeah.
immediately thought of somebody who could use it.
The only requirement for membership is a desire to be in a committed relationship and to develop new intimacy.
Ooh,
Yeah, isn't that great?
everybody. Yeah, everybody. I
Everybody.
love
So
that.
it's pretty all inclusive, but it does have 12 steps, but they're worked a bit differently in that there's a workbook with very specific questions, and it's
I
really
love that.
nice.
I think you kind of bring up something, you touched on something that reminds me. I heard a conversation recently about, everybody is so sensitive to their triggers, right? You see things, oh, trigger warning, I see those all the time now. And there was always something that didn't never really sat right with me about that. While I think it's important to be respectful of other people's feelings, I almost got the sense that getting triggered is an opportunity to heal those old wounds. And when you were talking about, as you were talking about the blame and the case building and relationship, that's really what's happening. It's like an old wound got triggered, and it was an opportunity. Like your instinct was immediately like, and that's what another benefit of long-term recovery is, right? Our response to those is different. Like yours is what needs to be healed in me. You went inside, right? And that speaks to somebody that has done their own work, which I really appreciate. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that we need to put trigger warnings on everything if we have tools that allow us to sort of lean into where the wound is. It's got to come up. We got to bring awareness to it so that we can heal it. Otherwise, it's just something that we've detached from or disassociated from. And we actually need to be triggered so that we can get back in touch with it to heal it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like that's what Harville Hendricks built a whole therapy on, that about we attract the partners in our
Yes.
lives that trigger what need to be healed in us.
Yeah.
The missing part of ourselves, right? If we're going to
Yeah.
make ourselves whole, like, so I like the word that you used just now, opportunity. I really do see.
Yeah.
I suppose I've lived my recovery that way, is I have seen almost everything as an opportunity, even when I feel most embarrassed, which is my least favorite emotion, and shame. I mean, I hate being embarrassed.
Yeah.
I just hate it,
Yeah.
but every time that I put myself out there, I really do see it as an opportunity. What am I going to learn from this? And then what am I going to do in the future based on that
Right.
learning? The other
Yeah.
thing that you said about, the first thought of like what needs to be healed in me. I think the big book is has a great message to say. It's pause when agitated, and that's the first. That's the first thing. It's like, if I'm agitated, I got to pause, but I can't just put some veneer over it if I'm really, like you said, triggered in some
Mhm.
way. Because if the trigger's in me,
Yeah.
I pull my own trigger. Nobody else does it. Nobody else pulls it. I pull it. Because if he's or she or they are doing something that's triggering something inside of me, am I going to, feel, react, and then think later? Or am I going to feel, pause, respond, think feelings? Wow, why am I angry? Am I hurt? What's going on with me? Oh, now I can act. So it's feel
Mhm.
or emotion,
Yeah.
think, act.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fair to say, like, I think of it in terms of like we carry around these soul bruises, right? And every once in a while somebody bumps up against it. And it's not other people's job to, you know, walk on eggshells around me. It's my responsibility to manage my own feelings. But I have been affected by other people's behavior, but it's what I choose to do afterwards that's important. And I recognize that part of this triggered response is like when your nervous system gets hijacked, like especially early in recovery when I was triggered, for lack of a better word, when I was feeling like it felt like my emotions were completely hijacked. It took a long time of healing before I was able to respond in the way I wanted to. I was like such a hothead. I used to break things a lot. I used to throw things. Um, it took a while for that healing to happen so that I could go through that process of, pausing when agitated. That wasn't something that came right away for me.
Yeah, I think that happens. It's especially with conditioning. I mean, after all, we are animals.
Conditioning.
We're
Yeah.
human animals, right?
Yeah,
But we're animals.
absolutely. Yeah.
So the fight, flight, freeze is, and how it plays out in early recovery is very reactive often.
Mm-hmm.
Or like in my case, I just shut up. It's like I froze,
There's your freeze. Yeah.
you know.
Have you heard about the fawn? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which is I will just be docile or be anything you want me to be so you can stop being mad at me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a form of freeze, I would say. Oh, fawn, FAWN. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's another F I can think of, which is probably not a great choice either if you're in some reactive mode.
What's that? Is it fuck?
You said it, not me.
I can't. Girl, I'll say everything that comes to mind.
I know.
Filter. There's lack of filter. Is that there's another F I don't have.
Right. But filter is probably the right, like, how can I pause? I mean, pausing is really hard, but we have to, like, we don't have to do anything. What am I saying? We don't have to do anything. But again, so if I talk about the recovery cycle, I'm thinking the top of it is, now we have a recovery focus.
Okay.
So what is it that I want in my, like, after I've reacted, I'm sober now.
Mm-hmm.
After I've reacted, do I want my marriage to look like that? Do I want my friendship to look like that? Do I want my work life to look like? How do I want this recovered person? How do I want my life to look like?
Right.
I drop on down to rituals, like now the rituals of using, we have recovery rituals, which replace those rituals of using. So we get a lot of information from meetings or whatever reprogram with therapy.
I like that.
Something that you're going to, your routine. Rituals, I just like the word rituals because it elevates this activity that we ideally choose for ourselves that has some meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So we have recovery rituals which inspire contrary action.
Yeah.
So taking that contrary action, which is self-affirming behaviors, these are positive behaviors we do for ourselves, which, by the way, might not feel comfortable.
Not at first. Yeah.
So addictive people are notoriously self-destructive, even after getting sober. So like you said, gosh, it took me so long. I was throwing things, I was doing this, I was doing that. So now, but we have we have that vision, recovery focus. We have the rituals, these routines that support what we're doing. We're getting ideas about how to be different. We take that contrary action and then we come back up. So we take contrary action instead of using, and instead of feeling just guilt, shame, and despair of using, now we feel a range of feelings, an expanded range of feelings, which are joy, maybe embarrassment, anxiety, discomfort, fun, love, whatever the feeling is.
Relief,
peace,
achievement. So many good. Yeah.
So having this capacity to acknowledge, experience, and respect and cherish our feelings is really like what I believe is so much of what sobriety is about. And with that, we get back to this idea of a greater recovery focus. Now I didn't yell at my husband. I didn't yell at my boss. I did this instead. And look at how it turned out. I think the vision for my life, and I'm talking even about me here, has gotten so much bigger, and I feel so much better that recovery now is this huge place of possibility and hope, and also good feelings, which I think a lot of people don't even know how to experience. And then finally, I'll just wrap this up in a bow, is that recovery cycle drops down into a greater feeling of connection. And I say with myself, that lost part of myself, greater connection to my soul, greater connection to others. And if one believes in a higher power, spirit of the universe, whatever you want to call it, with this spirit that we can't describe, that again animates, at least me, animates us and influences our will in the best possible way.
Absolutely. Unforeseen ways too. It's to be, I remember having this experience thinking, oh, it's got to be, you know, if there's a problem, it's got to be A or B. There's only two outcomes. And then when I opened myself up to this higher power, it was amazing how if I just trusted, things would unfold. And I was given this, you know, prayer of, you know, for the highest and greatest good of all involved. Right. Not just me. So I love that. I love how you put a bow on that, gave it the whole recovery cycle and the rituals. And I like the idea of recovery rituals as a sufficient substitute. That's really amazing.
The addiction cycle and the recovery cycle, if you put them side by side, the recovery cycle is the positive mirror image of that. So,
Ooh, that's
right.
good.
So instead of preoccupation, we have a recovery focus.
Yeah.
Did you get that? Instead
Yeah.
of the rituals. Okay. I don't have to go through it.
So good.
Okay.
So good. Yeah. And listen, we could talk all day about your book. There's more in there. I mean, talking about comfort and recovery, you know, managing feelings. You called it prices. We call it cash and prizes where I come from, but it's the same thing. So much more to this book. I really want people to get the recovery cycle. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, Joy. It was just, you are adorable. I hope people watch the YouTube version. You are adorable. Your red hair and lipstick.
Back at you.
Well, I am having a good hair day today.
It's a great hair day for you, man. I want that hair. I want that hair in my next life.
Well, listen, thank you. How can people reach you? You're on, I'm going to leave links to all your social media and stuff, but what's the best way for people to contact you?
I'm at communicatewithjoy, JOI.com. My handle on Instagram, I have a little few bits there, is at Joy, JOI, Andreoli, ANDREOLI. And those are the two places you can reach me. And I'm on Facebook too, somewhere. You could just, I think I have a business page and
you know what I started doing is I started linking people's link tree. Do you have a link tree on your Instagram?
That's always I do. I think yes, I do.
Okay. So I'll leave a link to your link tree, which will probably have a multitude of resources and ways to reach you.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Joy, it's such a pleasure. I hope we get another opportunity to hang out and talk some more about this. You and I could chit chat by the fire all day.
We definitely could. And if you ever make it down to LA, neck of the woods,
I might when the book is done. I have a bunch of friends down south, so I might have to come down for a book.
Excellent.
I will reach out if I do.
Excellent. And I look forward to your book. What's it called?
The 12-Step Exploration Guide, How to Navigate the 12 Steps for the Sober Curious.
Excellent.
You can go to 12stepexplorationguide.com for the first chapter or so. I haven't quite figured it out yet.
That's awesome. I support you, and you carry a great message.
Thank you so much. Listen, it was so great to speak with you today, and everybody go get Joy's book.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.